Welcome to this week's episode of Storytime. My name is Charlie Malone, and every week I try to share a story with you. And this week we're reading Thanks to the Animals by Sockabasin, and it's illustrated by Rebekah, Raye. And this says it's Sockabasin is a Passamaquoddy storyteller, and it's from a native Indian tribe in the Northeast. And I'm going to, at the end of the story, I'm going to read the author's note for parents because I'm very interested in how we share Native American literature, stories, folk tales, and stories from all different cultures in a respectful way that allows for people from different communities to communicate with one another and learn from one another. This book's called Thanks to the Animals. Winter had arrived, and Joy Tom worked for days preparing for the trip north with his family. He took apart their house near the shore and stacked the cedar logs on the big bobsled. Everyone helped. They packed the family sled with his tools and with the meats and fish and vegetables harvested during the summer, when the days were long. It was loaded to the very top with precious food, but Joy Tom made sure there was room for his children to ride in the back. Everyone dressed in warm sealskin clothes for the long trip. It was time to go to their winter home in the deep woods. The horses pulled the sled slowly through the new snow. Zusap was not yet walking, but he was a strong baby born in the spring. He rode on the sled with the other children. As the shadows grew long, the older children slept. But then little Zusap stood up and he tumbled off the sled. Oh, how Zusap cried. His voice filled the sky. The animals of the forest were alerted by his crying. First to come were the beavers. They knew they had to keep him warm and dry, so they put their tails together and cradled Zusap. You can see he's a little happier now. Zusap still cried, so the moose came. Then the bear, the caribou, and the deer. The fox and the wolf came too, and all the big animals lay together in a circle. Then the other smaller animals came. The raccoons, porcupines, rabbits, weasels, and mink. The muskrat and otter and the squirrels and mice came too. They gathered and filled in the cracks between the big animals. At sunset, the owl came. Then the raven, crow, blue jay, duck, and a goose gathered to perch on top. Even a seagull came. And one of the kids in my class reminded me that they were traveling from the seashore, where there would be seagulls. Last came the great bald eagle, who spread her wings over all the other birds and animals. Zusap stayed warm. When Joy Tom arrived at his winter home, he knew something was very wrong. Zusap was missing. Joy Tom quickly lit a fire for his family and got them settled, and then he turned back to the trail to find his son. He traveled through the woods all night, and just at sunrise he came to a very strange big mound of snow, and resting on top was a bald eagle. I knew you would come back for Zusap, the eagle said. Joy Tom looked down and saw his son safely sleeping in a great pile of warm animals. Joy Tung thanked the animals one by one. He thanked each animal. And here he's thanking the mouse. And then he took Zusap in his strong arms and went back to his family. When they arrived that evening, there was feasting and dancing. What a celebration. I love that story. Anyway, thank you for sharing it with me. And for now, I'm going to read the author's note for parents and teachers that are interested in that sort of thing. And it might be a way to think about how you choose the stories that you read to your children, tell to your children, and gives me some guidance in how I use different stories. Author's note. You may wonder why the family in this story takes down their cabin and moves to a different place. The reason has to do with the seasonal migrations my people once made. The natural world was a great gift to the Passamaquoddy people from our Creator. For thousands of years we roamed vast lands for our livelihood and our traditional way of life. My people freely migrated over these lands, especially along the waterways, moving with the changes of the seasons and as our physical and social needs dictated. The lands and waters provided a diversity and abundance of resources to sustain us. Our migrations also helped to maintain a good ecological balance without depleting any one of its resources. The stories of how we migrated with the seasons between saltwater shores and the marshlands and deep woods have been passed down from our ancestors through many generations of oral tradition. How far back do the stories go? Since they're not written history, we do not know for sure, but we know they came from long ago. The Passamaquoddy word for long ago sounds like bicha, with the accent on the second syllable. In spring, summer, and early fall, coastal shores provided an open and cool climate as well as access to fish, shellfish, and berries to gather. When the pollock and cod were running, whole families would travel to the fishing grounds to smoke and dry fish for several weeks. Passamaquoddy is our word for pollock. We are the people of the pollock. They would also hunt porpoise for meat, a main staple for our people, and for oil to light our lamps. The migration inland usually started in the fall and with the early snows. The woodland regions provided shelter from winter winds which blow fierce and bitter over the open coastal barrens. The deep woods provided firewood as well as natural habitat for big game such as deer and moose, and the marshlands bordering ponds and the inland reaches of estuaries provided habitat for beaver, mink, otter, and muskrat for furs and meat. The deep woods also provided plants and roots for medicines and raw materials such as brown ash for basket making, white ash for hand tools, and cedar for building furniture and cabins, because cedar logs are very light when dry and easy to shape with hand tools such as draw knives. Our coastal lands began to narrow as settlements of non-native people grew and the concept of land ownership was introduced. Our migrations became more contained and focused in smaller regions, and we began to settle and band in small groups and villages, fearing the loss of the land that had sustained us for many generations. Once we acquired horses through trade with other settlers, we were able to move our households and even our cabins on huge sleds made of white ash and maple. My grandfather and my dad made sleds and log cabins from cedar logs that were cut by hand and without nails. The logs were fitted exactly to each other using hardwood pegs, and they could be assembled and disassembled over and over. Cedar shakes were used for the roofs. Over the years, we lived more of each year in the woods as our access to coastal lands dwindled. Using horses, we were able to clear lands near our cabins to plant gardens to supplement our hunting and trapping. We settled a portion of the land over which we had roamed for generations. Our principal settlement is today known as the village upriver. Thanks to the Animals is a story of a transitional time for the Passamaquoddy people. The family in the story has horses, but is still migrating away from the coast and into the woods as the first snows fall. The story is also just what it says, an offering of thanks to the animals that sustained our people through the generations. And then there's this great fold-out page about the Passamaquoddy language, which it's noted is still spoken by many members of the tribe, and there are ongoing efforts to increase the number of tribal children who speak their native language. And here are all the animals with the Passamaquoddy equivalent for the name. So let's see, one, wolf, Molson, there. But just this book is a reminder to me of how important it is to represent diversity within diversity. Like, you can't just read a one book about Native Americans or about one community of Native American Indians and say, oh, we covered that. That's that's a sort of subtle form of stereotyping, or not so subtle form of stereotyping. So when, as a teacher or as a parent, you're trying to share literature with your children, your students, make it part of your job to look far and wide for the best examples of literature and stories that you want to share, and multiple examples, so that you don't unwittingly fall into traps of stereotyping or tokenism. Anyway, see you next week with another story, and until then, bye-bye.